Are you aware that people in China live in cages? But first, we'll start with our mission.
With firm faith, I believe and profess everything that the Catholic Church teaches. But for many reasons, the fullness of that message hasn't been getting out lately. What if we, together, set out to learn the faith, to live the faith, and to share this faith, like missionaries of old? What would the world look like in 100 years?
So you're telling me that I'm nuts because I've been talking about the end of the world, the chastisement, the Antichrist? Are you aware that people in China live in cages? Because I had no clue. Welcome, I'm Brad Shapizi. I've always had some vague notion that life in China was difficult. We've talked about it a lot here. Religious persecution, political persecution, forced abortions, communism. I'm no expert on China. I basically just told you everything I really know about China. But I could not help but wonder, with all of those things, is life in China at all something like a modern version of slavery? Like when we buy cheap Chinese products, is it analogous in any way to the slavery from our own history? Oh, I know it's fashionable right now to criticize China, and I fully admit that I'm speaking from ignorance here, so I'm asking for you to correct me in the comments below. But this weekend, I saw a story on CNN. Well, not a story, a picture. I didn't read the story because it was CNN. But the picture that went with it, I'll put it up. I saw this and I thought, what am I looking at? I have no clue what this is. I have no context to interpret this picture. The headline that went with it said something about cage homes. So I went to Google, looked up cage homes, and my mind was completely blown. So people in China apparently live in cages. And there are a number of documentaries on YouTube explaining why people live in cages. It's because of the housing cost or overpopulation. I heard one documentary make the claim that people live in these things because they want to live in these things. Wouldn't that be convenient for a communist regime if we all decided that we wanted to live in cages? You see where I'm going with this. I found a number of stories about social engineers who were trying to modernize the cages. Instead of calling them cages, make them look clean and futuristic. Call them pods. Look at this picture. What does that remind you of? That reminds me of that scene in The Matrix when Neo, was that his name, Neo? I haven't seen it in a while. You know, the guy from Bill and Ted. Well, anyways, when he wakes up in his pod, right? After he red pills. This engineer has designed a robot arm that moves the pods in and out of a warehouse to maximize space. Tell me again how I'm crazy for talking about the end of the world and the Antichrist. Because I'm just a dude on YouTube. All of that was actually in the news. Do you think that maybe there's a certain segment of politicians in America that are following this Chinese template, that are trying to fundamentally transform America into some version of China? Because I can't help but to point out, it kind of feels like, in some small way, we are living in cages. Well, think about it. First, a Chinese virus, then Chinese drones, then religious services are shut down, while Home Depot not only remains open, but is packed. We've seen a huge expansion in government power, the largest government spending bill in history, civil liberties have been thrown out. One governor even admitted that he was ignoring the Bill of Rights. We've seen people arrested for leaving their homes. We've shared numerous stories here of the media calling for an outright totalitarian government. So my question for you is, if I'm right about all of this, is it working? Are Americans laying down and taking it? Are politicians having success in bringing about this massive transformation? Because on the one hand, we have seen all of this crazy garbage. But on the other hand, we've seen many Americans protesting it. And at times, the president seems to be encouraging some of these protests. We've seen legal action taken against many of the cases against governors due to their overreach. I saw today the Attorney General of the United States is now threatening to take action against any state that infringes on constitutional rights. The president, while he's definitely made some missteps, he generally seems to have tried to keep power in the hands of the states where it rightfully belongs. I couldn't help but notice, unless I seriously missed something, that his three-phase plan to reopen the country, it does not create any new bureaucracy or any new giant government program. And honestly, I fully expected it to, especially after that huge stimulus program. Instead, it leaves the bulk of decision making in the hands of the states and the local governments. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's nothing to fear. Do you think that all of this means that what's happening in other places around the world could never happen here? Or would that be too naive to think? I think human nature is human nature no matter where you live. As we talk about these cage homes in China, I'm reminded of a trip that I took to South America. It was over 20 years ago. I was on a bus for hours. And I remember looking out the window and seeing a neighborhood that stretched as far as the eye could see. And the homes in that neighborhood were made of scrap metal and garbage and boxes. I've never seen so much poverty in my life. And it wasn't a small neighborhood. I was on that bus for hours, and the rows of houses kept going on and on and on. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about poverty. I understand that poverty exists. We will always have the poor. I'm talking about a society and ideology that treats the poor like they're animals. There's a huge difference between poverty and slavery, and that's the distinction that I wish to make. Where does this come from? Why are we sitting here in the year 2020 with all of our enlightenment, all of our technology, stuck in our homes? Why are people in China living in cages? Why are people in South America living in boxes? From the beginning, our ancient enemy sought to treat us like animals. From the beginning, he resented us. He resented God for making us. He resented God for uniting a spiritual form to a material cause. I guess you could say he was the first Gnostic. He viewed himself as the greatest of all creatures, God's most beautiful creation. But in us, he saw his own dignity threatened, because while our souls resemble, in some small way, the angelic spirits, our flesh resembled that of the animals. When he learned of God's intention to become incarnate, to become one of us, he realized that he would have to have the humility to bow before a man. And in this, he was seriously offended. So he said those famous words, "I will not serve." And he rebelled. In his vengeance, he sought to mock God's decision to create us by demonstrating to God that we are truly just like animals, that given the opportunity, we would choose our flesh over our spirit, that given the opportunity, we would embrace hedonism, food, pleasure, sensuality, and because of this, we were destined to be just like animals, and we could never be raised to a sanctified life. So, he went to the garden with the singular intention of attacking our mother, not Adam, but Eve. Why? Because it was from her that all of us would come. He tempted her like she was an animal. He showed her the fruit and told her how good it must be to eat, what a delight it was to look at, how much it was to be desired. He appealed to her senses like a mere animal. And ever since that day, he has continued to tempt us, her children, teaching us to act like animals, to squander our inheritance, just like the prodigal son who lived and ate with pigs. And these designs continue to our day, where we see examples just like this, people acting like animals, people treating each other like animals, so blatantly to literally put people in cages. We are not brute animals. We were created in the image and likeness of God. In the incarnation, God reveals to us his glory, that we may behold his beautiful and sacred face, that we may behold endless and eternal love. But he also reveals to us what we had long since forgotten, our human dignity. We are not like the brute animals, which are stuck in cages to be harvested for profit. Through the Eucharist, God fulfills his divine plan through our humanity, that same humanity that our enemy attacked when he tempted our first mother. Just like in the garden, through precious food, bread from heaven, the very fruit of Our Lady's womb, when the priest says the words, "Take this and eat," now we see how good he is, and we delight to look upon him, and we desire to receive him, not because we are animals, but because this is not regular food, like food that tempts us through our senses. This is God himself, who is our eternal goal, who fulfills his eternal plan in the Eucharist, because at Mass, in humility, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is true God and true man. Let me know what you think about the cage homes, and remember to pray to Our Lady in the Holy Rosary to bring us back to the Mass. Click here to watch the last video, and remember, if we learn the faith, if we live the faith, and if we share the faith, what will the next 100 years look like? Join the mission. Every couple of days, someone in the comments reprimands me for idolatry. Throw away all your idols and icons and repent. They will not save you. Come to